Welcome to Slight Reliability, the show where we learn about SRE and observability 1 week at a time. I'm your host, Stephen Townsend. Welcome back to Slight Reliability. I'm Stephen Townsend, and this is the show where we learn about SRE and observability, and now DevOps 1 week at a time. Welcome to 2024. It's been quite a long time. This is really quite strange. It's been over 2 months since I've sat down and recorded an episode, and I haven't done a solo episode in quite some time. A lot's changed since last time I presented. I have a new job. I went from developer advocate to environments manager, and I'm in a new house. So many things have changed, but it is good to be back. And in my new role, as I wanted, I'm being exposed to so many challenges and ideas and things that I want to talk about and problems that I want to solve, which is exactly what I wanted. And the first thing I wanted to talk about today is how we treat non-production environments. So I'm talking about test environments, dev environments. Now, in production, when there is an incident, in most organizations, in most situations, there is some group of people, some processes, and some tooling to track and deal with that incident. Whether that's effective or not is a different story, but at least there is something defined. But what about our test environments and our development environments? Sometimes we have test environments, they are not production, but we may have dozens of teams throughout the organization who depend on it to do their work. So they're very important. But we often don't have anything in place to handle incidents in those environments. Now, throughout my career, I've heard this term environment issue for whenever a test environment doesn't work. Now, what is an environment issue? It's an incident. It just happens to be an incident that's in a non-prod environment. So if an environment issue is just an incident, then why do we have incident management processes and people and tooling in place for production, but often we don't have anything in place in our non-prod environments, when some of those environments are absolutely critical path to the delivery of major features and initiatives. My experience throughout my career has been that our non-prod, our test environments tend to have a completely different set of people who look after those environments. In production, you often have this, unfortunately still, dedicated production support teams. Of course, it would be better to bring those into the dev teams or at least bring them closer. But in our non-prod environments, we tend to have more development, delivery folk involved, maybe tech leads. Sometimes we have different tools in place for production versus non-production. For one, in production, whenever there's an incident, there's generally some kind of incident management tool to track that incident from we've identified a problem, or the customer has, and to investigating it and remediating it. Now, the same tooling generally isn't in place for our non-prod environments. So how do we track these environment issues, aka incidents? In the past, I've seen situations where there was no incident management tooling or process. Instead, there was like a Slack channel or a Teams chat with literally hundreds of people involved. And the process was, I can't do something, something's wrong in my environment, I'm going to post about it in this chat and hope for the best. I've also seen tooling differences around observability. So maybe different tooling entirely. I've seen quite often lots of rigor around monitoring observability in production, lower levels of observability, visibility in our non-prod environments. Or the same tooling, but different levels of rigor. So one thing I'm looking at the moment is the use of synthetic transactions. So we quite often have them in production. Let's make sure every 10 minutes, every 20 minutes, let's check that we can, in my case, get an insurance quote. What about our lower environments? Maybe a shared test environment, which dozens of teams across the organizations depend on. Why are we not using synthetic transactions in that environment? Similar to tooling, but a little different, is the existence and access to assets and documentation. So for production, there's generally some kind of run book or documentation about what to do when there's an incident. But as a developer or someone working in the delivery space, I never saw those or had access to those. Now, I think this is a huge lost opportunity to practice what we will do in production from the beginning as we deliver and develop features and products. It's a chance for us to validate that what we think is going to happen and what the process is that we define is working before we even get to production in the first place. And to build a muscle memory around this is the process, these are the tools, let's get so familiar with them that when things go wrong, when environment issues or incidents occur, that we know what to do and we know where to look, we know where to go. The other thing is around the consistency. So having different support teams to support production versus development and delivery, ultimately trying to achieve the same thing, but going about it completely different ways and not sharing the knowledge that they have between them. That's also a lost opportunity. Of course, I can hear in my head right now, a lot of you out there saying, you shouldn't have separate ops teams, it should be DevOps, and I agree with you. But let's face it, and the reality of many organizations around the world is there are dedicated separate operations teams. And I think the third aspect of this is that if you are practicing your incident management processes in delivery, in your non-prod environments, you're building a culture of reliability for the products and services that you build from the start, because you're getting that feedback loop earlier on. When things aren't reliable, you're going to hear about it and you're going to get a chance to remediate and fix that and understand the importance of the reliability of what you're building. I will say that from my perspective, I'm most interested in integrated shared environments because that's where the biggest impact is if there are unreliable services. To a degree, you want to move fast. If you've got development environments which no other team is impacted by, do whatever you want to a degree. It doesn't impact as many people. Of course, we should try and make them as reliable as we can, have robust deployment pipelines and automated testing and quality checks and quality gates. Absolutely. But I think the stakes raise the more teams, people, stakeholders are using an environment. I think an interesting side effect about if you tried to treat your non-production incidents like production incidents is that it shines a spotlight by forcing you to rub up against issues onto other areas that you might want to address, such as having that split ops and delivery teams that I just mentioned earlier, or related to the above, just the organizational structure in general. And this could be a chance to experiment with something new so that we get the benefit of not duplicating effort and having different teams trying to do the same thing in different ways. If your incident management tooling in production is unwieldy and slow and difficult, and delivery teams say, no, we're not going to use that, well, then why are we using it for production? Maybe it's a chance to reflect on that and say, this tooling isn't actually very fit for purpose. Why don't we experiment with something which could be easier and enjoyable for the people who want to use it and more effective? And the other one that comes to mind is the cost of observability tooling. Sometimes I hear arguments that say, well, we can't set up the same level of observability from production in our non-prod environments because it costs too much. I think that if your tools are costing so much that you're hesitant to use them for genuinely valuable work, then it's time for a different solution. So I guess in summary, many organizations around the world have test environments and other pre-production environments which are critical path to deliver important features and products, and which maybe hundreds of developers and testers are using across an organization. It makes sense to me that we treat these more like a production environment in the way that we handle incidents. Now, I'm not saying that we can treat non-prod environments exactly like production, or that we should, but treating these as two separate things is a huge lost opportunity, a chance to build muscle memory, to practice our incident management processes early, and to not duplicate effort between teams trying to achieve the same thing. This episode was sponsored by SquaredUp. SquaredUp combines your data with awesome dashboards, analytics, health roll-ups, and notifications into a unified observability portal. Using a data mesh architecture, SquaredUp is a beautifully simple way to get instant access to the insights that matter whenever you need them. If you want to know more, head over to squaredup.com to sign up for your free account. Thank you for tuning in, and I wanted to say a big thank you in particular to everyone who's been answering my questions online on LinkedIn around observability. I've had awesome responses and some fantastic ideas around how to deal with situations like observability when you have SaaS vendors. I will come back and talk to those questions and the answers that were shared in the near future and potentially get some interviews around that as well. That's all from another episode of Slight Reliability. I'll see you all next week or the week after that.